Hi, you left your comment a month ago and I'm sorry that it takes me so long to get to these things sometimes. I have no good excuse. Sorry. I actually reached out to Amy through DM and asked exactly what was going on, and as soon as she described what was going on, I knew what the problem was. Amy's learning TIG welding and doing a fillet weld in the vertical position, so 3F, and walking the cup. And the problem that she's having is that it will ball up on her and then fall, and there's a void, and then it'll ball up and then fall. Additionally, the bottom of her torch is hitting the coupon, so she knows she's holding it wrong. And I remember those frustrations. I really completely do. I'm usually pretty good at like fixing things in my life. If I see something going wrong, I can adjust and you see a little bit of improvement. I remember welding school not being that way. I remember welding school taking a little bit longer every time I improved. It's not always intuitive. Once again, for those of you just joining us, TIG welding is a process that uses a non-consumable electrode sharpened right to a fine point, and it focuses an electron beam into the workpiece, and then you add an additional filler rod as part of the weld. You melt the parent metal and you add the rod in there, and it all makes one homogeneous mixture. In theory, it should all be equally strong with no stresses in any one place. And I start salivating when I know I can do a bunch of vertical up TIG welds, because walking the cup is so simple. Like once you get it down. I used to do walk the cup on pipes. I don't know if I can do it on my coffee mug. Walking the cup is when you use that non-conductive pink ceramic cup as a guide to just hover over the surface of your material. This thing's slippery. Hard to do on a round surface like that, but in a corner, it's sweet. And really the secret to learning how to walk the cup anywhere is the length of your tungsten stick out. Because you're limited by that cup. If you're freehanding it, you can adjust. You can point up high if you need to consume more rod, if you need to point it down low. If you're walking the cup, you're kind of locked in. You can't do much else because you've got a fixed distance from the point to the end of your cup. Sometimes it takes a couple little trial runs to see what you think is gonna work best. And I think what you said is the bottom of your torch is hitting this, and that's when you really start getting goobers. I know how you're probably set up at school or wherever you're learning this. I've got my positioner coming exactly out the bottom of this, which is going to hinder me when I go to, try to swing my torch into it. But I don't hold my torch like this when I do vertical ups. I mean, unless I'm like in the position where I've got an impedance up above. If I'm impeded above, you'll see me keeping everything down below. Otherwise, I turn this thing right over. If you're holding it like this, I highly recommend against it, because you're gonna burn up your finger. Once you get good at this, you can keep your hand out of the arc. Flip that puppy right over. Now you're not at all limited by anything down here. I also recommend taking a little bit of emery paper to your ceramic cup. A nice used glazed heated cup will slide along better than a brand new one that's got that matte finish. It's kind of grabby, grabs the material as it goes up. So back to your specific problem, I think you're getting the torch firing up too high too often. Because an ideal setup, an ideal stick out will have the ideal angle to just melt that rod as you travel across it, right? And you'll have the amperage just right. That's one thing you could adjust. You could back off your heat or like give it that extra little punch if you need to kind of like wet it in. And when you start going a lot faster, you learn to pick up your speed. You can, increase your heat a little bit to let it burn off. When you have your angles right, you can just walk it along and burn off that rod, turn it into a weld. If your tungsten stick out is too short, you're going to drive the heat into your material instead of up a little higher where the rod can burn off and become a part of things. Rather than having an angle of burning off kind of like what I've got here, now that my tungsten's back in too far, I have to kind of pick up the end of my torch to get my puddle sticking in the center, in the dead center where I want it to be. When I try to walk and wash, now the distance between the tip of my tungsten and the plate is a lot smaller. I'm going to dip on my filler rod. Conversely, if you've got your stick out too far, you're going to get ahead of yourself with the arc. Now instead of having that angle about where I'm comfortable welding, I'm going to have to drop this way back. Now my torch is dropped down way far and my tungsten is sticking up way high, and you might be able to do a little bit of burn off with that, but if the arc starts shooting up too much, you're going to burn off the rod before you even get the plate hot under it. And what's funny is having either too much of a tungsten stick out or too little of a tungsten stick out could cause the problem that you're having. This would be my first guess, because it's a lot easier when you slip. There's a lot going on when you're TIG welding, thinking about your speed and your heat and your input and your angles. And if you've got a death grip on your torch and you're trying to walk the cup and it slips, you're probably slipping up and leaving your boogers. You're slipping because you're already pointing in the direction that you're headed. Maybe knock your length back just a little bit. The way you could burn off your rod before you get to it if your stick out is too short is that if you're going along and it's not burning, jammed in there, you're going along, you can't burn your rod off, the tendency is to lift it up, shoot your heat straight up, and melt off rod instead of just adding it to the top of your puddle. Man, I hope I'm saying all this right. So all I'm trying to impress in this video is that there is a perfect sweet spot for your tungsten to be sticking out if you're going to be walking the cup ever. And though it's been a little while since I've done one of these, I will run one and I'll stand back just so you can see my stance and what I'm doing and how I'm doing. I don't think I'll be able to capture the arc just because I've never sufficiently seen video footage of welding that helps me a ton. There have been a couple of really good videos, but they're kind of few and far back. I can't produce it. I can't produce a good welding POV video for you, so I'll show you how I look when I'm doing it, and then maybe I'll try it under a hood or something. We'll see. Something that I do remember doing when I was doing those tube joints, boiler making, is every time I put a new tungsten in, I would do a dry run over the tube, see how it feels. Yep, I think I like it. I've got a 16th inch tungsten and 332 wire. Let's see how it works. Okay, my hood's flashing me. My hood was flashing me. My hood was just deciding it didn't want to dim. It's okay. Batteries are dead in my Sentinel, so I've got my speed lens, and I remember why I don't always use it, because it flashes on and off. It's wet in on the sides. I started to give up there at the end. Let me try that. More cheaters. We're gonna try not to get flashed. Well, I'm rusty, but I made it happen. I haven't done this in years. First try, second try. Also, I'm not welding in an actual joint, a nice sharp 90. This is a radius and a bent piece of metal. That's all I have. Listen, it's been a while and I don't do it very often. And it's just, you're so pretty. By the way, this is a term I don't throw out very often. This is the haze, H-A-Z, the heat affected zone of the weld. And as you can see, because there's a lot more material here to act as a heat sink, the haze only goes so far out from the weld, but it consumes, this entire webbing here that's only like a ½ inch big. The heat didn't have anywhere to go. It couldn't escape off the plate, so it just kind of built up and built up and built up. And that's not good for the material. The heat affected zone is where you see a lot of cracking and brittleness, and that's where corrosion will start. Mitigate this with your heat input and your speed, and also there are heat treatment options too. If you can't avoid it with your welding, you can do pre and post heating. Right there only, right, the tiny little bit there. That's an ideal weld. The rest of it's a little bit, oh my god, swipe left.